She could not see. She kept walking into walls. She bumped into doors. She tripped over steps that everyone else could see perfectly fine. And they laughed. Every single one of them laughed at her. The aliens around her called her broken. They called her a burden. They said she would never amount to anything. They said she was useless. But here is the thing that nobody expected. She became the most important being in the entire galaxy. Not because someone fixed her, not because she was healed, but because one human, one single ordinary human, saw something in her that the whole universe had missed. And what happened next will genuinely shock you. In this story, you are going to discover 3 things that will blow your mind. First, you will find out why her own people rejected her completely. Second, you will learn what one human did that changed everything forever. And third, you will find out what she became, and why it terrified the most powerful beings in the galaxy. This is not a story about weakness. This is a story about what happens when the whole universe is wrong about one person. Let me show you exactly how this happened. Her name was Isla. She was born on a planet called Verath. It was a cold world. Beautiful, but cold. The sky was always a deep shade of purple, and the twin moons hung low every night like 2 pale eyes watching everything below. The Varathi were an advanced species. They had been traveling between stars for over 3,000 years. They had technology that humans had not even dreamed of yet. Their cities floated above the clouds. Their ships could fold space itself. They were proud. Deeply, deeply proud. And pride, as it turns out, has a very dark side. On Verath, every child born was tested. Not just for intelligence, not just for strength. They were tested for something called resonance. It was a kind of biological connection that the Varathi had with light. Their eyes were not like human eyes. They did not just see light. They felt it. They read it. They used it to communicate, to navigate, to sense danger, and to connect with one another on a level far deeper than words. Resonance was everything on Verath. And Isla was born without it. It was not that she was completely blind in the human sense of the word. She could detect shadows. She could sense large shapes moving nearby. But the deep visual resonance that every Varathi child developed within their first few months of life, that never came for her. The healers tried everything. They ran test after test. They consulted the oldest doctors on the planet. They tried treatments that had worked on other children with partial resonance loss. Nothing worked. When Isla was 3 years old, the head healer sat down with her parents and told them the truth. Their daughter would never see the way other Varathi saw. Her father did not say a word. He just stood up and walked out of the room. Her mother stayed. She held Isla's small blue hand and tried very hard not to cry in front of the healers. She failed. Growing up, Isla learned quickly that the world was not going to make things easy for her. The other children were not cruel in the way that human children sometimes are. They were not loud about it. They did not scream names at her or push her down in the schoolyard. They were cold. That was somehow worse. They stepped around her the way you step around a puddle on the street. Careful, distant, like touching her situation might somehow affect them too. The teachers gave her simplified tasks. Her neighbors spoke to her slowly, like she was stupid, instead of just unable to see properly. Even her own extended family treated her like a problem that had no solution. By the time Isla was 12, she had learned to move through walls by memory. She counted her steps. She memorized the layout of every room she spent more than 1 hour inches. She developed a kind of spatial awareness that was honestly remarkable. She could feel the vibrations of footsteps through the floor. She could sense air pressure changes when a door opened 2 rooms away. She was adapting. But nobody noticed, because nobody was looking. Her father had built a separate life. He worked long hours and came home late. He was not a bad man. He just did not know how to love something the rest of his world had already given up on. Her mother tried. She truly did. But even her mother's love sometimes felt like grief wearing kind smile. Isla spent most of her evenings alone on the edge of her family's floating platform, her feet dangling over the side, listening to the wind move between the towers of the city below. She could not see the lights of those towers the way everyone else could, but she could hear the hum of them. She could feel the warmth they pushed up into the air. She did not feel sorry for herself. That is the thing people never understood about Isla. She was not broken inside. She was just waiting. She did not know what she was waiting for. But somewhere deep in her chest, in a place she could not explain, she knew something was coming. She just had no idea it would arrive wearing human boots. His name was Corporal James Harker. He was 26 years old. He was from a small town in Yorkshire, England. He had joined the Earth Interstellar Corps, not because he had big dreams of exploring the galaxy, but because the job paid well, and his little sister needed help with university fees back home. James was not special. He would have been the first person to tell you that. He was average height, average build. He was good at fixing things and bad at paperwork. He made terrible jokes at exactly the wrong moments, and he drank too much coffee. He had been stationed on Verath for 4 months as part of a joint diplomatic support team. The mission was simple. Earth and Verath were in early talks about a trade and technology exchange. The humans were basically there to look professional and not embarrass themselves. James spent most of his days fixing communication equipment in the lower sectors of the Verathi city. It was quiet work. The Verathi mostly ignored the human team. Not rudely, just with the kind of polite disinterest that very advanced civilizations sometimes show toward younger ones. He was fine with that. He did not need people to pay attention to him. He first saw Isla on a Tuesday morning. He was carrying a toolbox through the mid-level walkways when he heard a sound. A soft thud, followed by silence. Then another thud. He stopped and looked around. Most people were walking past without reacting. A few glanced over and then looked away quickly. A young Verathi girl had walked into a support pillar. She was maybe 14 or 15. She had the same blue-toned skin as all Verathi, with silver markings that ran along her temples and jaw. Her eyes were striking amber color, and they were open, but they were not focused on anything. She straightened herself, placed one hand lightly on the pillar, and began counting steps quietly under her breath. Nobody helped her. Not one single person stopped. James put down his toolbox. He walked over slowly, making sure his boots were loud enough on the walkway that she would hear him coming. He did not want to startle her. "Hey," he said. "You all right?" She stopped. Her head turned toward his voice. There was no embarrassment on her face. No shame. Just careful attention. "I miscounted," she said. Her translator implant turned her words into English automatically. Her voice was calm and precise. "I can walk with you," James said. "If you want. Where are you headed?" She considered him for a moment. He could tell she was deciding whether to trust him. "Platform 7, she said. "Level 9. "I know where that is," he said. "I've walked that route every day this week." "Come on." They walked together. He did not grab her arm or try to guide her like she was helpless. He just walked beside her and told her what was coming. A step down in 3 paces. A low beam overhead. A wet patch on the floor from a cleaning unit. She listened to everything he said. When they reached Platform 7, she stopped and faced him. "You are human," she said. "Last time I checked," he said. "Humans usually try to hold my arm," she said. "They think I need to be carried." You don't look like you need carrying, James said. You look like you need good information. Something shifted in her face. It was small, just a slight softening around her eyes. But James caught it. Thank you, she said, and she walked onto the platform. James picked up his toolbox from where he had left it and went back to work. He did not think it was a big deal. He had no idea that the girl he had just walked to Platform 7 was considered the most useless person on an entire planet. And he had absolutely no idea that in 2 years, that same girl would be the reason his entire species survived. They kept running into each other. It was not planned. Verath was a big city, but James worked a specific circuit of the lower and mid-levels every day. And Isla, it turned out, came to those same levels every afternoon to sit near the observation decks and listen to the city. The second time they met, she recognized his footsteps before he said a word. Your left boot is louder than your right, she told him. The sole is wearing unevenly. You should get it fixed. James looked down at his boots. She was completely right. Good ears, he said. I pay attention to what others ignore, she said simply. He sat down next to her. They talked for almost an hour. He told her about Yorkshire, about the moors and the grey sky, and the way his mum made tea so strong it could strip paint. She listened to every word with total focus. She asked questions that surprised him. Not polite questions. Real ones. What does cold feel like to a human? Do you navigate by light or by memory? When you are in a place you have never been before, what do you feel first? James answered honestly. He had never thought so carefully about how he moved through the world. Over the following weeks, they developed something that neither of them had a word for. It was not exactly friendship, though it was becoming that. It was more like recognition. Two beings who had both learned to operate in worlds that were not quite built for them. James was not brilliant by Earth standards. He was not fast-tracked for promotion. His commanding officer liked him well enough, but considered him ordinary. Back home, he had always been the guy who fixed the broken thing in the background, while everyone else got the credit. Isla was the girl her entire civilization had written off before she turned 4 years old. But together, something strange was happening. Isla began describing things to James that no one else had ever mentioned. She told him that she could feel the resonance frequencies of the city structures through the soles of her feet. She knew when a power grid was under strain before any sensor detected it. She could identify individual Varathi by the specific vibration of their movement. She had developed a completely different map of the world, one built entirely from sound, vibration, pressure, and temperature. James started writing it all down. Not officially, just in a small notebook he kept in his jacket pocket. Then one evening, everything changed. James was deep in a maintenance shaft on level 3 when his equipment picked up something it should not have detected. A signal, faint but structured, coming from beyond the outer edge of the solar system. He ran a second check, then a third. The signal was not random. It was organized, repeating, modulated in a way that suggested intentional encoding. He reported it to his commanding officer immediately. The officer forwarded it to the Varathi Technical Authority. The Varathi technical team analyzed it for 6 days. Then they called a closed council meeting that no humans were invited to attend. James found out what was discussed 3 days later when a Varathi junior analyst, someone Isla trusted, quietly told her what had been said in that room. There was something coming. Something that had destroyed 4 other civilizations in the Outer Rim over the last 200 years. Something that moved without making electromagnetic noise. Something that the Varathi's light-based detection systems had failed to track until it was already too late for those 4 worlds. The Varathi Council was frightened. For the first time in 3,000 years of space travel, They did not have an answer. But Isla sat very still when she heard this. And then she said something that the junior analyst would later describe as the moment everything changed. She said, "I have been hearing it for 6 months." She said, "I thought it was just the city settling." She said, "But it is not the city." She said, "It is them." The room went completely silent. James was the first one to speak. He leaned forward and looked at Isla very carefully. "You have been hearing this signal for 6 months," he said. "Not hearing exactly," she said. "Feeling. Through the ground. Through the structure of the platform. It comes in very long, slow pulses. I assumed it was geological. But now that I know what it is," she paused. "The pattern makes sense. It is not random. It has rhythm." James grabbed his notebook. "Tell me everything," he said. What followed over the next 72 hours was one of the most extraordinary intelligence briefings in the history of human and Varathi relations. And it happened not in a military command center, not in a high-level council chamber. It happened in a small maintenance room on level 3, with a Yorkshire mechanic writing in a paper notebook, while a girl her own planet had called useless described something that no sensor in the galaxy had managed to detect. Isla had developed, entirely on her own, a sensory map of the vibrational fabric of Varathi space. Because she could not rely on light, she had spent years learning to read everything else. And in doing so, she had accidentally built the most precise low-frequency detection system that had ever existed. She was not broken. She was exactly what the universe needed. James brought his notebook to his commanding officer. The officer read it twice, then went pale, then made 3 calls in rapid succession. Within 18 hours, a joint emergency meeting was convened between the Earth Interstellar Corps senior staff and the Varathi High Council. For the first time, the Varathi were the ones sitting quietly while someone else spoke. Isla stood at the head of the table. She was 16 years old. She was the girl they had all ignored. The girl her teachers had given simplified tasks. The girl her father had built a wall around. The girl her neighbors had stepped around like a puddle. She stood at that table and she described, in precise and careful detail, the movement pattern of the approaching entity. Its speed, its trajectory, the specific vibrational frequency of its advance, the subtle pressure changes that indicated how it redirected energy around conventional detection systems. The Varathi High Counselor, a being who had lived for over 400 years and had never shown visible emotion in a public setting, stared at Isla for a long moment after she finished speaking. Then he said, "How long have you known this was possible? That you could detect them this way?" Isla thought about it. "I have always known I was detecting things others could not," she said. "I did not know it mattered until someone told me it was worth writing down." She glanced at James. James looked at his notebook. The counselor followed her gaze. He looked at the human mechanic from Yorkshire sitting at the far end of the table with his paper notebook and his uneven boots. "You did this?" the counselor asked. "I just listened," James said. "She did everything else." The next 14 days were the most intense in Varathi recorded history. Using Isla's vibrational mapping as a blueprint, the Varathi engineers designed an entirely new detection array. Not light-based, pressure and frequency-based, built around the exact sensory system that Isla had spent 16 years developing in total isolation, because nobody thought it was worth anything. The entity was tracked. Its path was calculated. A coordinated response was prepared. And when the moment came, it was Isla who sat at the center of the detection network, feeling the world the way she had always felt it, guiding the response teams in real time with a precision that no machine could match. The entity changed course. It moved away from Varathi space. It moved away from human space. It kept moving. For the first time in recorded galactic history, it retreated. Nobody who was in that room would ever forget the silence that followed. It was the kind of silence that only comes after something enormous has just been prevented from happening. In the days that followed, something shifted on Verath. It was not immediate. Change rarely is. But it was real. The first thing that happened was that the Varathi High Council issued a formal statement. It acknowledged that their resonance-based evaluation system for children had a critical flaw. It had been designed to measure one specific kind of perception. And in doing so, it had systematically dismissed every other kind. They called it a civilizational error. For a species that did not use those kinds of words lightly, it was a profound admission. The second thing that happened was smaller, but in many ways more important. Isla's father came to find her. He had watched the council broadcast. He had seen his daughter stand at the head of that table. He had listened to the counselor speak about her contribution. And then he had sat alone in his apartment for a very long time. When he found her, she was back on the edge of the family platform, feet dangling, listening to the city. He sat down next to her. He did not say anything clever. He did not have a speech prepared. He just sat there for a while, and then he said the simplest thing. "I was wrong about you." Isla did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, "I know." She did not say it with anger. She said it the way you say something that you have known for a long time and have already made peace with. He reached out and took her hand. They sat there together as the twin moons rose over the city. The third thing that happened was that James Harker was called into a meeting with his commanding officer and informed that he was being recommended for the highest joint commendation that Earth and Verath had ever issued together. He looked genuinely confused. "I just walked her to a platform," he said, "and wrote things down." His commanding officer stared at him. "Harker," he said, "you listened to someone the entire galaxy had decided was not worth listening to. Do you understand how rare that is?" James thought about it. "In Yorkshire," he said slowly, "we have a saying, you can't hear anything if you're too busy talking." His commanding officer wrote that down. As for Isla, she did not become a celebrity in the way you might expect. She did not want speeches or parades. She asked for one thing. She asked that the Varathi education system create a new evaluation framework. One that did not just test resonance. One that looked for every kind of perception, every kind of intelligence, every kind of sense that a child might develop. The council agreed. Within a generation, Verath discovered that they had been dismissing a remarkable percentage of their own population for thousands of years. Children who perceived the world differently. Children who had gifts that the standard test simply could not see. They called the new framework the Isla evaluation. She never asked them to name it after her. They did it anyway. James finished his tour of duty on Verath and went home to Yorkshire. He fixed things. He drank strong tea. He visited his sister at university. He was not famous. Most people back on Earth had no idea what he had done. But every year, without fail, a message arrived on his communicator from a planet with purple skies and twin moons. It was always short. It always said the same thing. "The city is quiet tonight. Thank you for listening." He always wrote back, "Just doing my job." But they both knew that was not quite true. He had done something much rarer than a job. He had looked at someone the universe had given up on and decided that the universe was wrong. And the universe, as it turned out, had a great deal to learn from a blind girl from Verath and an ordinary man from Yorkshire who simply chose to pay attention. Here is the thing that nobody talks about when they tell this story. The entity that approached Verath space that year had successfully destroyed 4 other civilizations. 4 worlds, gone, and in every single case, the survivors' records showed the same detail. Each of those worlds had detection systems. Each of them had brilliant scientists and advanced technology. What none of them had was someone who perceived the world differently enough to notice what everyone else had filtered out. The universe does not always warn you in the language you are built to hear. Sometimes the warning comes in a frequency that only the people you dismissed can detect. Isla did not save Verath because she was fixed. She saved Verath because she was never broken to begin with. They were just too proud to look. If this story opened your eyes, even little, to what we miss when we give up on people too soon. Let us take a moment and think about what just happened in this story. A girl was written off by her entire civilization before she was 4 years old. A mechanic from Yorkshire decided to listen to her instead of walking past. And together, 2 people that nobody considered important saved an entire world from something that had destroyed 4 others. That is the story. But here is the question I want to leave with you today. How many Islas are out there right now? How many people in your life, in your school, in your workplace, have something extraordinary inside them that nobody has taken the time to notice? If this story hit you the way it hit me writing it, do one thing. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you want more stories like this, stories where the person everyone counted out turns out to be the one who changes everything, then hit that subscribe button right now. We put out new HFY stories every week. Stories about humans and the unexpected ways we show up in the universe. Drop a comment below and tell me this. Who in your life saw something in you that everyone else missed? I read every single comment. See you in the next one.